Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Inside LSU Baseball. As always, you're stuck with me. I'm your host, Jason Armstrong. And man, I love LSU baseball. And I assume if you're here, then you feel the same way. And we won't have to wait much longer because we are just so close to opening weekend. And, it's fun to talk about lots of different subjects and projecting and things like that. But there's nothing that beats watching the Tigers play on the field. But until then, we'll keep at it. And we got a good episode for you today. I think you're going to enjoy the subject matter. And let's just dive right into it. So I've been following LSU baseball extremely closely. I've watched them for forever. Um, but really, since Jay Johnson took over this program, it's been at a different level. Okay, and one thing that you notice if you watch LSU play is that their teams always have that serious dude in the lineup. All right, that hitter who strikes fear into opposing pitching staffs, the guy that the other team has circled before the weekend even begins, or that player that if you make a mistake and groove one, you're going to have to hear Lynn Rollins, with the famous pucker up and kiss that baby goodbye call, which, man, I can't wait to hear that again. So, and that's coming, man. What a great call. One of the best calls in all of baseball. However, for the first time in years, LSU baseball doesn't have that familiar power threat on the roster as we approach opening day. Doesn't mean that we won't find one. But as of right now where we stand, they do not have that one big, scary power threat. But don't let that fool you, because this 2026 squad may have more power throughout the entire lineup than any of Jay's other teams. So the power isn't missing. The power is just different. As far as the home run, there is nothing in baseball quite like it. I mean, look, the chicks dig them. Stadiums erupt when their team's player, launches one in the stands. Some of the best radio or broadcast calls come from the local guy, calling a ball, getting sent into the bleachers. It's just a lot of fun. You put a bat in my hand today, and I can go out there and hit a line drive over the second baseman's head, right? I can, likely pull a ball in the gap. It might bounce, 8 times and hit the wall, but I can still do that, make good contact, even at the age of 47, all right? What I can't do is turn on one and crush it. One of those where like the left fielder doesn't even move. He just turns around and watches, the ball land in the outfield bleachers. That is not something that I can do right now. Now, if you're at the level of a college baseball player, especially D1, especially SEC, actually, look, if you play college baseball, I don't care what level, you can hit. You can hit flat out. But very few can hit with power. That's for a select group of hitters. Now, as much as we love the, dingers and the sexiness and the aura and the excitement that comes from hitting a home runs are much more than that. They are a huge part of college baseball as a whole. And more times than not, the teams that go furthest at the end of the season are the teams that can hit for power, especially when you get to the postseason. It's just how it is. In postseason, there's a couple factors. You're having to play away from your own ballpark. So, some teams play in a smaller field. So when you get to postseason, you're playing on fields with larger dimensions. That can be, that can be one factor. You have other things like you're facing really good pitching. You're facing really good arms. Teams that make it to the postseason have some really good guys. And look, the coaches are, with so much on the line in postseason ball, they're pulling out all the stops. You're not leaving a guy in the game on a regional opening weekend or regional opener that's getting hit around. You might see the second starter come in the fourth inning in a relief role. You could see a team's three best pitchers come in and pitch every couple of innings in the opening game of a postseason tournament. All these factors make it very difficult to, string together multiple hits. All right. So having the ability to hit a 3-run homer late in a game is a very big separator. I'm going to give you a couple examples just from last year alone. Okay. Let's take Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt won the conference tournament in Hoover. They entered the postseason as the number 1 seed in the entire postseason tournament. Okay. Now, they had one player who had over a 300 batting average. That was Riley Nelson, JUCO transfer, really took the league by storm. Left-handed hitter, played, I think, first base, got drafted, so he's not there anymore. But he was their only one. If you only have one guy that's hitting for that, a good average like that, you better have some power if you're a team that's struggling to hit overall. All right. Well, the problem is Vanderbilt had one double-digit homer guy, and that was Brody Johnson, the third baseman, the freshman, really good guy. He hit, I think, 15 home runs. That is not a good combination. All right. So you don't hit well as a team, and you don't hit for power. Which is why with 9 games left in SEC, they weren't even like a host maybe at that time, and then they, not only did they wind up hosting, but they're the number 1 seed. So anyway, they play in a home regional. They played 3 games. All 3 games were 1-run games. The game that they won, Vanderbilt won, they actually rallied from a 3-0 deficit by hitting 3 home runs. They won the game 4-3. All 4 runs came from home runs. Okay. They only had like 4 hits in the whole game, as a matter of fact. So that's the game they win. In the 2 games they lost, again, these were 1-run games, they only hit 1 home run. They got down early in both of those losses, and they just didn't have the ability to get back in it with the long ball. They really struggled to get anything going after they got down. It felt like they were down 5 runs because hitting, stringing together hits was a struggle, and they weren't hitting for any power. Now, on the other hand, Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a team that finished like 10th in the nation in home runs. They actually had some success in their regional. It was a really good regional. They won a 2-run game versus a very good, like a 45-win Western Kentucky team by hitting 6 home runs. Then Ole Miss blasted 3 home runs against a very good offensive Georgia Tech team. Ole Miss hit 5 homers to beat Murray State. And even in the 2 losses that Ole Miss lost, they scored 17 runs and hit 5 homers. And they almost came all the way back from a huge 10-3 deficit in that finals game. And that was because they could hit for power. They lost 12-11 to Murray State. But after being down big, like Ole Miss would never go away. They got down early in lots of games. They hit so many home runs. They were always in it. Now they fell short, but it's 2 different, big contrasts in one team that really, once they got down, they didn't have an answer, while the other one was just a nightmare. All right, and that was a very good regional. But look, here's where things get interesting for LSU. Because power can show up in a couple of different ways. All right. You can have like that superstar hitter who carries the load, or have pressure from every spot in the lineup. Now, think about like a 2024 Tennessee with all of those guys, that were hitting 20 home runs. It was just so much pressure. It's just hard to deal with them. So, and honestly, LSU's offensive identity is probably shifting from the first over to the second. So this is a program, LSU is, that is known for the long ball. I mean, they've got a reputation for hitting home runs. This is the original Gorilla Ball. 1997 team still holds the single season record for most home runs in a season with 188. I believe the second highest was that 2024 Tennessee National Championship team that finished with 184, but they did it in a lot more games. But anyway, that LSU is no stranger to hitting home runs. And look, times have changed. You don't see those type of home run numbers. There's different bats. The balls are different now. But all four of LSU's teams under Jay Johnson have reached the century mark of 100 home runs, all 4 years. The team with the most home runs, as you'd probably guess, was 2023, the national championship team. They actually finished second in the whole country in home runs per game with over 2.03 home runs per game. They finished with 144, only behind Florida. Florida hit like 146 home runs that year. But, those are the two teams playing in the final. So that's a testament right there to what power can do. There was 2 other years, both 2022, so Jay Johnson's first year, and then again in 2024, where LSU finished with 114 home runs. Now, last year, this team that just won the national championship was the lowest amount of home runs that any of Jay Johnson's teams have hit, but they did eclipse the 100 home run total. They finished with 103 home runs. And look, it looked for a while like they weren't going to get there. This is an offense that a lot of people questioned throughout the year. I mean, even as far as into the postseason. So now look, although LSU didn't have anyone hitting, 40 home runs like Brandon Larson did in 1997, LSU has had that one big bopper, that scary home run threat on all of these last few teams. So let's start with 2022. All right. That team in Jay's first year, that was Dylan Cruz after his freshman year where he hit, I think it was like 18 home runs and Gavin Dugas hit 19. The 2022 team, Dylan Cruz hit 22 home runs. So, everybody knew who Dylan Cruz was, and that was just a scary bat to pitch to. Now you move to 2023, the national championship team. Then you bring in, to go along with Dylan Cruz, now you got Tommy White, who Tommy White was coming off of a 24 home run freshman year at NC State. After like 10 days of the season, he already had a nickname, Tommy Tanks. All right. So Tommy White hits 24 home runs in 2023. That next year was really the most prolific home run duo I think LSU has had in a long time. Maybe ever, with Jared Jones leading the way with 28 home runs. Tommy White still hit 24 again that year, but Jared Jones hit 28. So again, every year. And then last year, Jared Jones once again reaches 20 home runs. He finishes with 22. But there was a big drop-off after him. The next highest home run total was Ethan Fry, who came in with 13. But all 4 of those years, you had at least one guy that eclipsed 20 home runs and was a serious long ball threat. So that's what LSU's, power has looked like these last 4 years. And again, always had that true centerpiece bat in the lineup. And look, that's a luxury not all college teams have. It's just not. You love to have that scary guy in the lineup, but, not everybody does. So it's a luxury when you do have that. Now, this year's roster, might be built a little bit different. And you can see exactly, how that is as we start going through the projected starters. And these are my projected starters, okay? You might have different starters. And again, I'm not going to get too much into that because we still got the next couple weeks for that to kind of fall in line. But this is just kind of how I see it, all right? So let's start with the freshman of the year, Derek Curiel. As a freshman, Curiel hit 7 home runs. Now, his hardest hit ball in 2025 registered at 107.5 mile per hour on TrackMan. And all of his hardest hits as a freshman were opposite field line drives. Now, a lot of the things that people have talked about, and when it's talking about, when you hear draft talk and how high can it go, we wanted to see Derek Curiel put on weight, get stronger, hit for more power, make harder contact. Well, the good news is that this fall, Curiel hit a ball 110 miles per hour in Biloxi when LSU scrimmaged. I guess it was Sanford, which is something that everybody's been wanting to see. All right. It shows a lot of the off-season weight program paid off. And this is something scouts are going to be excited about if that carries forward. The other thing is that he's pulling the ball in the air. Just last week, he hit a home run in one of the inner squads to the right field bleachers. Can't remember who it was off. It was one of LSU's really good arms. Was it Newt? Maybe it was Newt. I think it was Newt. But anyway, so you're talking about a guy with elite bat to ball. I mean, his exit velos is very high. I mean, he's got a great, as far as whiff rate, he doesn't swing and miss a whole lot. He's very selective. So now you got a guy that's hitting the ball harder, and pulling the ball in the air. So is it crazy to assume that Derek Curiel goes from 7 home runs as a freshman in the SEC to double digits? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. As a matter of fact, I expect him to. Now, Jake Brown. Jake Brown finished with 8 home runs in 2025 on just 212 plate appearances. That is 110 less than, let me think. I think that's than Derek Curiel finished with. So I want you to imagine that is roughly 24 games worth of plate appearances. You give Jake Brown the same amount of chances and he finishes the same year, just using a little algebra math, 12 home runs. So I think he's going to improve on, his just ability from last year, which puts him easily in that, 12 to 15 home run territory. This is a guy that a lot of draft people are buzzing about, that have really high hopes for. So again, Jake Brown, I think that power production goes up even higher. Stephen Milam, 8 home runs as a freshman, 11 home runs as a sophomore. So what's next for him? Something interesting about Stephen Milam is that he has struggled both years. So both of his years, I think it was as a freshman and a sophomore, he had spurts where he really struggled. Now, he always turns it on in the postseason. So I'm really thrilled to see Stephen Milam in a scenario where he's consistent all the way through, not just in the postseason. And what does that look like exactly? So, but again, this is a guy who hit double-digit home runs last year. He hits from both sides. So I don't have any doubt in my mind that he's going to continue as a double-digit home run guy. Now, Cade Arrambide. Cade Arrambide as a freshman was in the 100 percentile in barrel percentage, okay? Now, let me explain to you what barrel percentage is. It measures the perfect combination of launch angle and exit velocity. Essentially, that's what leads to home runs and like doubles off the wall, all right? So you were talking about a guy who only hit 4 home runs, but you're only talking about like 60 something at bats. But more importantly, like his home run rate was 26%. That is absurd. So I have heard Kate Arambidi, and this was last year. A lot of people talked about his power along the long lines of like Jared Jones, that if it didn't work out at catcher, this is a guy you could plug in at first base and has so much power. Now, the great news is how much he has improved behind the plate as a defensive catcher. And now he's hitting the ball. He's the best, offensive player, period, in the fall. And he's picking right up where he left off. And so, look, Arabidi's still going to have to show he can hit spin, breaking pitches, but all signs are pointing to a lot more contact, and this guy hits with a ton of power. So now you take a guy with a 26% home run rate and plug him into the regular lineup. This is the easy double-digit home run guy. He reminds me a lot, if you follow a lot of SEC baseball, of Ryder Helfrich. Ryder Helfrich was a guy, excuse me one second, let me fix my light right here, was a guy that as a freshman really, really struggled. Give me 1 second. Let me fix. I'm not plugged in. My computer's going to die if I don't get plugged in here quick. How are we doing now? Let's see. Bear with me 1 second. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. All right, we're back in the mix. Let's get the light going back again. But again, Ryder Helfrich, the Arkansas catcher, this is a guy that as a freshman, his numbers were very, very similar to Kate Arambidi's. And then last year, he has like a breakout year. Goes crazy, hits 15 home runs, I think, and now we're talking about this guy is possibly a first rounder in the draft. I see a lot of similarities between Ryder Helfrich and Kate Arambidi. Only difference is Ryder Helfrich's going to be a junior this year. Arambidi is in his sophomore year. All right, Trent Caraway. Clearly the Oregon State transfer that came over. He finished last year with 12 home runs. All right. The funny thing about that is that a lot of people would consider that a disappointing year for Trent Caraway. This is a guy who was super famous coming out of high school, getting a lot of first-round buzz. Decided to go to Oregon State. He had a lot of injury his freshman year. And then again, last year, had a lot of parts of the year where he is too much swing and miss. All right. Now, by the time he got to regionals, he had 6 home runs. He set an Oregon State record. He was batting leadoff in College World Series. The thing about Trent Caraway, as I mentioned, is he doesn't hit the ball hard often enough. There's too much swing and miss. And so who better than, to get him hitting the ball more consistently than Jay Johnson and this staff, right? So I think that, Trent Caraway is a guy that once he gets, to where he's making more contact, we know this from looking at his data. When he hits the ball, he hits the ball harder than most people. All right. So we've heard rave reviews about him so far this fall. And so, do I think that Trent Caraway, if he hit 12 home runs on a down year last year, that he can hit double? Absolutely. He's actually a guy that, if you're going to start looking for 20 homer guys, that's a great option right there. Okay. But again, all dependent on how much contact he makes. Now, Braden Simpson came from High Point. All right. Now, he was top 11 in the entire nation last year in OPS, RBIs, doubles, and home runs. He finished the year with 22 home runs and 24 doubles. That's absurd. Look, I get it. He played at High Point, but here's the thing. You can't lie, or you can't, when it comes to the data and all of the measurements and how hard he hits the ball, Braden Simpson destroys the ball. All right. Destroys the ball. I've mentioned this before, but like he was talked about by a pro scout as like having an extremely violent swing, and he really does. I did a poll recently on Twitter asking, out of Zach York and the four transfers, Dardar and Simpson and Caraway, who would hit the most home runs this year. I was very surprised that Simpson was way in last. I don't know if people. Well, I get it. A lot of people don't watch, probably watch High Point play or don't, maybe dismiss the fact that he came from a smaller school. But let me tell you a difference, okay? If you're gun shy because you look at a guy like Danny Dickinson last year who came over from Utah Valley, people were talking about him as a top 2-round pick. There's a big difference. Dickinson doesn't hit the ball that hard. Like it's just he. If you look at all of his hit, data, he's not a guy that makes a lot of really hard contact, okay? And he still finished with 12 home runs. Braden Simpson destroys the ball, all right? So to go along with that, over 50% of his hits last year were extra base hits. So I mentioned it, 22 homers, 24 doubles. That's over half. That's nuts. Zach York is next. He hit 13 homers for Grand Canyon in just 48 games. To put that in perspective, that's 20 fewer games than LSU played last year, and he still finished with 13. The thing about Zach York is guys, look, he's huge. He's almost 300 pounds, but he doesn't swing and miss much. He is a very, very good hitter. Like, if you watch college baseball for years now, everybody knew about Zach York. He can hit the ball. So this isn't a guy who every now and then makes contact. This is a guy who makes a ton of contact, and his exit velocities, his average exit velocities are very high. And even the top end, of his hardest hit balls are extremely hard. They rank in like the 85 to 90 percentile of all the country. So look, do I think Zach York is a guy who can hit double digits? Absolutely. Now, Seth Dardar, another guy, over 50% of his hits, extra base hits. The last 2 years, not one. So at Columbia, and then again last year in the Big 12, a good conference where he hit over 340 with 13 home runs. So this is another guy that when he makes contact, he's hitting the ball really, really, really hard. All right. Okay, let's talk about some other guys. Tanner Reeves, John Pearson, David Harden, Omar Cerna, Mason Braun, all powerful bats. Look, Tanner Reeves, I don't know how much he's going to start or when he's going to be in the lineup. And look, he might play against right-handed pitchers where some guy, we don't know. All right. There was a year in JUCO that Tanner Reeves hit 20 home runs, so he's got it in there. Look, if you remember back to the regional last year when he started against Little Rock, he flew out to the wall twice. Remember that annoying center fielder had to go make catches right at the wall? So look, he's got the power. Tanner Reeves does. John Pearson, this past summer for the Lacrosse Loggers summer ball, Pearson was hitting a home run every time I turned around. Look, he worked on his body a lot. This is a very, very powerful bat. And this is a guy, depending on how much he plays, whether it's DH, some infield, that the sky is the limit. When this guy makes contact, he kills the ball. Mason Braun, when he went, entering or at the conclusion of his freshman year last year, he went to the MLB draft combine, which a lot of these players do that, if they're getting attention in the MLB draft, whether they decide to get drafted high enough to go or they come to college. He was invited to the combine, and he hit the longest home run in their batting practice session. So Mason Braun is a good-looking freshman that can, he can really hit, all right? Omar Cerna, freshman, he looks like an action figure. Both last 2 years in high school, both years he hit 8 home runs. This is a guy with massive power. And then again, David Harden. This is a guy from Baton, played at Catholic High and then played at McLennan Junior College, a really good junior college. Last year, he hit 16 doubles and 12 home runs. All right. And he hit like 330 or something. So he makes contact and he can hit for power. So look, that outfield is very good, but this is another option that's a left-handed bat, and you never know what's going to happen out there. All these guys are going to get playing time. So the whole thing is this. It's not just the projected starters. The power runs deeper than that. And this goes beyond just me going through the roster. Let me talk about a different angle here. The way that this lineup has power spread out, it really fits Jay Johnson's style and the way he coaches. And let me explain. Jay Johnson is not a guy that likes to run, all right? I can't tell you how often over the years watching, a guy like Paxton Kling get on base or Chris Stanfield or whoever else. And, you want to see them run, or you want to see the guys get to second base in scoring position, and it doesn't happen. And they either hit into a double play or whatever, something else. And it's just not what Jay Johnson does. All right. You don't see a bunch of bunting to advance runners or hitting runs. Now, last year was the most small ball we've seen from Jay Johnson at LSU, and it was out of necessity. We saw safety squeezes. We saw that double steal where they'd purposely get put in a run down at second base and try to score the runner. That was a new wrinkle. But again, this was a team who really struggled at times offensively, and that pitching staff and defense carried them. But that's not Jay's style. Jay's style has always been to trust that his hitter is going to be better than the pitcher, that you're going to wait for your pitch, and when they make mistakes, you're going to hit it, and you're going to hit it hard. And look, it's worked great some years, other years not so much. Look, 2024, and Jay's talked about this, that they were too dependent on the long ball. And that's just how it goes sometimes. But this roster this year, I think, allows him to coach the way that he is most comfortable. And that's what I mean when I say that LSU's power is just different this year. Because for the last few years, LSU's offense had that face, all right? A superstar bat in the middle of the order that everyone knew about. This year, the power is not going to be wearing that one jersey, whether it's number 22 or 47. Was that what Jones was, 22? Drawing a blank. It's spread throughout the lineup. And that might make this LSU lineup even harder to attack. And that's hard to believe because they've had great offenses. And it's going to be a very dangerous, offense to deal with, over the long haul. So there might not be that one guy putting up 20 home runs by himself this year. And that's when we talk about 20 homer guy, like we've had every other year since 2022. We might not see it. I don't know that there is a 20 homer guy, but you're going to see balls leaving the yard all throughout the lineup. Now, there's one guy, and I didn't talk about Stanfield because I really think outside of Stanfield, I think you're full of double-digit home run guys. I think they're all double-digit home run guys. Stanfield, that's just not his thing, and that's okay. All right. But that's going to do it for today. Hope you enjoyed this. Appreciate you guys listening as always. And we will be back here soon. And hope you join us then. Take care.